All right, so only 2 weeks of football left. Very sad, but very exciting as well because we really get the playoff race it's not even heating up at this point. It's just full on hot at this point. Anything could happen. I'm very much excited to see what's going to happen. And so I've been doing this for a few weeks now. It's ended up being a really fun series. I didn't expect it to be. It just kind of, sometimes you just fall into this kind of stuff. What I do is I predict every single game from here on out, and then I see with those predictions, who makes the playoffs, who doesn't, who's in which seed, all of this stuff. And it kind of can let you know where each team is at a certain point. So it's pretty fascinating. Let's just get into it. So first things first, just real quick, we're not going to go through each one of these, although we probably could at this point. There's only 2 weeks left, but these are just my predictions for every game from here on out. The one that's kind of lighter, that's the one that I'm predicting to win. Just in case you're curious how I got to a certain team getting a certain area, well, this is how. And yeah, let's just start in the NFC where I think we have a couple of surprises. So let's go with the 1 seed and work our way down. Packers at 1 seed, that checks out. I think most people are expecting that. Although worth mentioning, if Green Bay just slips up once and Dallas does win out, Dallas would get the 1 seed, which would be pretty crazy. And I think what's really interesting about these top 4 teams, really the top 5 teams, we've kind of talked about sort of the big 5 in the NFC all season. And those have kind of changed here and there, but it's always been, in terms of the order, but it's always been Green Bay, Dallas, Los Angeles, Tampa Bay, and Arizona. However, what's always fascinating about this, and what's always fascinated me, is whoever gets that 4 seed is going to be stuck playing the 5 seed, that other team. So Tampa Bay taking on Arizona, as a Buccaneers fan myself, I'm hoping we can avoid that matchup because Arizona, especially if they get DeAndre Hopkins back, is very good. And I'm sure Cardinals fans are hoping that, they can find a way to get a 3 seed here and avoid, whoever they would end up playing if they had the 5 or the 4 seed. So that stuff is very interesting, and right now I'm projecting Tampa Bay to get the 4 seed. You also see Arizona, I'm not just projecting them to get the 5 seed, I'm projecting them to go 11-6 here, which is a big drop-off considering, they started off 7-0. I had them basically just going 1-1 in the stretch. They're currently 10-5, but I have them losing to the Cowboys, who I had them beating the Cowboys basically for most of it, but I like what Dallas has done lately and haven't been crazy about what Arizona has done without DeAndre Hopkins these past couple of weeks. Number 6 and 7, these are another couple of interesting teams here, with New Orleans and Philadelphia getting those 2 wildcard spots, the second 2 wildcard spots. And let's just show the entire NFC, and you can kind of see why this is the case. So first, for Philadelphia, their schedule, we talked about, there's kind of an easier schedule down the stretch, and they play Washington next week. They win that one, I think that they're in, basically. I think that probably is enough to get them in. They then play Dallas the final game of the schedule, which, listen, things could be locked up then. If Dallas loses next week and Green Bay wins, then Dallas won't have anything to play for in terms of the 1 seed there, but they probably would still, fight for playoff seeding because, like I said, you want to avoid that number 4 seed if possible. So, but still, for Philadelphia, you get a win here, really good chance of making the postseason. For Washington, it's probably not going to happen, and for the Giants, it's definitely not going to happen. For the San Francisco 49ers, they're another very interesting team because you see that I have them missing the playoffs. I'm moving down to the NFC West, obviously. So for San Francisco, they're a team that I could easily see finding a way to get in. I had them projected as getting in for basically this entire season, so I'm surprised that they've fallen a little bit here. Quite frankly, the losing to the Titans, that's kind of a win that they needed a little bit. I think that they'll beat the Texans. I know the Texans have played actually pretty well these past couple of weeks. I still think that that's, I'm giving that as a San Francisco win. And then they're playing the Rams Week 18, final game of the schedule. That could be a huge game, and that could determine if they get in or not. Because again, if this is the way it works, where the Saints, the Eagles, and the 49ers all end up at 9-8, which I'm projecting they do, then you have San Francisco missing out there. Although for the 49ers, all you need is for the Saints to lose one of their next 2. They play the Panthers and the Falcons, or you need the Eagles to lose against Washington next week. That would be all the help you need, but you do need some help here. You do not control your own destiny at this point, so that's interesting. Moving on, now we'll go to the NFC North. Nothing too crazy here. I mean, again, it's this whole whole Minnesota thing of I've continuously felt like the Vikings are a top 7 team in the NFC, but the issue is you have to, have the record to prove it. And they lost to the Rams last week, which, that's kind of it. You expect it, but that's one that you could have really used. And for the Vikings, their pathway is a little bit more simple. If you can win the next 2, you do have a 9-8 record, given the way that everything else I have set up works. So let's say they beat Green Bay next week and everything else stays the same, then Minnesota would make the playoffs at 9-8. Them and the Saints would be the 2 teams in, and then also Dallas would take the 1 seed over Green Bay. So huge implications week 17, especially when the Vikings play the Bears week 18. So it looks bleak for the Vikings a little bit, but hey, you beat the Packers, who you've already beaten this season, and you can jump into that playoff spot. It's not out of the question whatsoever. So they have a real chance. And then, NFC South, the Saints, I think, are a real surprise team that I have them in, but it's just who they play. They played the bottom 2 teams in that conference. Although I also should mention Atlanta, who has the same record, they actually have an outside shot at getting into the postseason as well. They would have to beat Buffalo next week, which I don't know if I think that's going to happen. That would definitely be, it's a bit optimistic thinking to think it could happen. But if it does, then they play New Orleans, who, again, I have New Orleans beating Atlanta and Carolina. That doesn't feel like a given to me, though, either one of those. I have them as a slight edge. So if Atlanta can beat Buffalo and then beat New Orleans, they would actually, if we're operating under everything else that I have in place stays the same, they would actually get in. And weirdly, then San Francisco would get in because, New Orleans lost, and then there's the whole tiebreakers get changed. So a lot of interesting stuff in the NFC, but those are the 7 that I am projecting to get in. Meanwhile, in the AFC, so currently you have the Chiefs, who are projected to be the 1 seed. I feel pretty good about that. They still do play the Bengals and the Broncos, so it's not out of the question that they could lose one of those games. Like, it really isn't. And interestingly, if they did drop next week to Cincinnati, they would fall to the 2 seed. The Titans would end up as the 1 seed. So how crazy would that be if the Titans could still end up there with the 1 seed? Who knows if it'll happen, but pretty interesting. Buffalo, with their huge win over New England, now is projected to get the 3 seed and win the division. They would play New England in the playoffs, which would be a lot of fun, quite frankly. Cincinnati, I currently have as the 4 seed, and then the 3 wild cards are the Colts, the Patriots, and the Chargers. And let's go to the full AFC so we can kind of get a bigger picture of why those teams are making it. So over here, first let's start off with the AFC North, and then we'll work our way around. I know the Dolphins are a team that they're very much, I think that a lot of Dolphins fans are expecting them to potentially make the playoffs. And listen, it's a great job they've done to fight their way back into this, and it's not out of the question. I do think for them to make the postseason, what they would realistically need is to win out from here, which would mean they have to beat the Titans and the Patriots, which is going to be tough. I have them losing both of those 2 games. Maybe they'll end up splitting and winning one of them, but to win both of them, it's going to be tough, but not impossible. And again, the 7 seed I have here is still a 10-7 team, so it's a little bit more tougher to get into the playoffs in the AFC than it is in the NFC. In the AFC West now, going down, so what's interesting is that, the Chargers play the Raiders week 18. If the Raiders can beat Indianapolis, then they have, that game would probably end up being like a win and you're in game if everything else breaks down a certain way. So the Raiders, they control their own destiny, which is kind of what you want 2 weeks left into the season at the very least. So obviously they'd love to just, have won a couple of the games that they kind of blew early on this year and not have to worry about this. I still think about them losing to the Giants this season, them losing to the Bears this season. They've lost some tough games, won some good ones as well, but the reality is this is a team that they stand a chance. Losing to Washington also is tough. They have to now beat the Colts and the Chargers, but they have a chance here to get in. And for the Chargers, just don't lose and you're good. Although they themselves play Denver and they play the Raiders, so those 2 games I have them favored in both. Not a guarantee that they're going to win both of those. So it's totally possible that the Raiders could sneak in. Going to the AFC North now. So again, I have Cincinnati as the team that I am projecting to get in. I have them only going 1-1 down the stretch. I have them losing to Kansas City next week, but then beating Cleveland the final game of the season. That it's possible that could end up being another one of those, like, winner takes the division, loser goes home style of games. It's possible. Cleveland actually even plays the Steelers next week on Monday Night Football, so maybe it's even a bit more possible than you realize, because, that happens, and it depends on Baltimore a little bit. But with Baltimore playing the Rams next week, and then the Steelers the final week of the season, and how banged up they are, I don't know if they can beat anybody with all the injuries they have. So craziness going on in the AFC North. And then finally, the AFC South. Not craziness whatsoever. There is still an outside chance the Colts could potentially win the division, but they would need some help from Tennessee, which I just don't know if it's going to happen. But yeah, as a whole, a lot of fun stuff. Very much looking forward to 2 more weeks of regular season football, and then we have postseason football, and then we have a very dark offseason that I hope lasts very short. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.